بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله حمدا والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. My dear respected listeners, inshallah tonight we will be looking at a hadith in relation to zakah. So as we know, in the month of Ramadan we fast. This is something that of course many Muslims, all Muslims do, and standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in qiyam on a nightly basis and so forth. But there's one thing that has not been specifically stipulated for the month of Ramadan, but generally many Muslims do in the month of Ramadan, and that is to discharge and pay the zakah. Infaq fi sabilillah, or sadaqah, or charity. This is obviously recommended in the month of Ramadan, because as we look at the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, how he would become more generous during the month of Ramadan. So yes, generosity is there. We should be very generous. And one of the ways a person is generous in the month of Ramadan is by doing infaq fi sabilillah, spending in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the best ways to spend in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is obviously by discharging your zakah, paying your zakah, because it is compulsory. So inshallah today the intention is to look at the hadith. There's so many ahadith obviously, and there are many verses of the Quran in relation to the obligation of zakah, the fardiyah of zakah. As a matter of fact, if you look at the verses commonly mentioned in the Quran about establishing prayer, immediately after the establishment of prayer is encouraged, clearly it says to discharge your zakah. And the scholars have counted how many in total of these places or these verses exist where salah and zakah are mentioned side by side together in the same verse. They have come up with a number of 81. So 81 times Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about zakah alongside salah in the Quran. In other words, just as important as it is to pray your 5 times daily prayers, it is also just as important to pay your zakah, to discharge your zakah. Unfortunately, many of us, we pray, alhamdulillah, we pray, but when it comes to our zakah, we are quite relaxed. We don't really pay that much attention to the payment of zakah, how much we should be paying, how we should be paying, who are the eligible recipients, and all these other various masail and things related to zakah. Unfortunately, many of us Muslims aren't really cautious, and we are not so educated in relation to zakah. So that's why the hadith that I've chosen today again talks about the fardiyah of zakah, and there are many hadith. This is just one of them from the Kitab al-Zakah of the Sahih of Imam Bukhari rahmatullahi alayh, where he mentions the narration of Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anh, that on a particular day a Bedouin, an Arabi, a Bedouin, came to the Prophet ﷺ and posed a very simple question. He asked the Prophet ﷺ, "O Prophet of Allah, tell me some amal, tell me some action or some deeds that I can do that will lead me to Jannah." Very simple question. Tell me what I should do and I will do it, and this will lead me to Jannah. And then the Prophet ﷺ obviously responded to his question. So let's look at the hadith. It mentions, Abu Hurairah says, "An Arabiyan ata an-Nabiy sallallahu alayhi wa sallam faqal dullani ala amalin idha amiltuhu dakhaltu al-Jannah." So the Prophet ﷺ then replies, "Qala تعبد الله لا تشرك به شيئا وتقيم الصلاة المكتوبة وتؤدي الزكاة المفروضة وتصوم رمضان." So when he asked this question, the Prophet ﷺ replied, this is quite simple, that ta'bud Allah, that you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, la tushriku bihi shay'an, and do not associate any partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Only worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, yani tawheed in other words. Wa tuqimu as-salat al-maktuba, and pray your 5 times daily prayers that have been prescribed. The 5 compulsory prayers that have been prescribed, pray them. Offer those prayers. وَتُؤَدِّي الزَّكَاةَ الْمَفْرُوضَةَ, and the zakah that has been made compulsory upon you, pay your zakah, discharge your zakah. وَتَصُومُ Ramadan, and fast during the month of Ramadan. These are the a'mal, these are the deeds that if you fulfill, then inshallah they will lead you to Jannah. And then the hadith continues. Right at the end of the hadith, it mentions that this Arabi, this Bedouin, after having his question answered, then he left. he was going back to wherever he came from. And then the Prophet ﷺ said to the rest of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum that was still seated there, said, do you want to see a person from Jannah? If you want to see a person from Jannah, have a look at this person. He asked a simple question. Now he's made a promise that he will fulfill. He will act upon what I have advised. And if he does so, then this is a person of Jannah. So it goes to show that number one, it is something that is fard. It's not something that is optional. It's not something that we can do by choice. If I'm a person wealthy enough to discharge a zakah, we'll get onto that later on. How much money, gold and silver do we need to have for us to be a payer of zakah, a person that needs to pay zakah and discharge zakah? We'll get onto that. But the fact is that if I am one of those individuals, if I fall into that category, then I should be paying my zakah. Just as I should be fasting in the month of Ramadan as mentioned in the hadith. Just as I should be offering my prayers as mentioned in the hadith. And just as I should be worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone without associating any partners. So that goes to show the importance. Now, when it comes to should I be paying or not paying, when it comes to that question, because many people think that, okay, is it compulsory upon me or not? So of course there are many hadith and so forth. To simplify it, the ulama have mentioned, as long as you have if the nisab, whatever the nisab is, obviously that has been derived from the hadith in terms of gold and silver. If the nisab, the threshold that has been set, if you are above that threshold, if you have more than the nisab, then you are paying zakat. You should be paying zakat. If you fall under that threshold, you don't have what the nisab, the value of nisab is in your locality in that particular year, then you are the recipient of zakat. There's no middleman. You're not in the middle anywhere. You're either paying zakat or you're receiving zakat. There is no such person as he doesn't pay and he doesn't receive. So you're either a person that is paying and discharging his zakat, is contributing, or you're on the other end, which is a person that is receiving zakat. So that simplifies it. Now, what is the nisab? The value of nisab? Again, this will vary between city to city, country to country, year to year. It all changes depending on where you are. But the nisab that has been calculated for this year for us in Australia is approximately 470 Australian dollars. Somewhere in that range. Of course, day to day it can change, fluctuate slightly. So anywhere between $450 to $500 is the nisab. If I have more than that, if I put my cash assets, my gold and silver, jewelry, whatever put together, if it's worth more than that, then I need to pay my zakat, which is 2.5% of the entire assets that I have. When it comes to a person that is a recipient of zakat, he needs to have less than that nisab, which is, like I said, approximately about $475, somewhere between the 450 and 500 range. Now, one common question. Now, there's many masail of zakat which a person individually will need to clarify, because everyone's situation is different. Some people are just normal people that work. They don't really have a business or anything. So their zakat will be different to a person that owns a business, runs a company. Then there will be those that are not in debt. Their zakat masail will be different to a person that is in debt, he owes money and so forth. So I've just mentioned the threshold. Now to go into more detail, it will be too much obviously in one video. So this is something that you need to clarify and you need to get cleared by your local scholar, your imam, whoever is close to you and knows of this. So that's the nisab. But there's one common question which many people face, so I thought I'll just clarify that. But apart from that, all other masail is better that you clarify with your imam. The masala that I just wanted to mention was that of many people said that if I have a mortgage, then what can I do? I'm going to be paying off this house for the next 10, 20, 30 years, so I'm not going to pay zakat, or I shouldn't be paying zakat because I have a loan. The type of loans that these mortgages are, back in the day, these are not the type of loans that people would take. They wouldn't take loans that are stretching up to 10, 15, 20, 30 years. They would only take loans for short periods of time, and those loans were completely excluded from your asset. So whatever your asset is and your the amount of money that you owe could be completely excluded and deducted from your assets. But now that we have loans that are owing for many years, even into decades, then the ulama have stipulated that this is different. In this case, if you owe someone money that you will be paying back over a period of many years into the decades, then in that case you can't deduct the entire amount that you owe from your assets. All you can deduct is what is payable in the next 12 lunar months, excluding interest if you are involved in interest. Excluding, so whatever your minimum repayments are for the next 12 lunar months, that's what you can deduct from your assets, your current assets, excluding the interest amount. So let's say someone's minimum repayment is, let's say $1,000 per month. Okay, over a 12-month period, it will be $12,000. But let's say 500 of that is interest and 500 is towards the capital. So in reality, he can only deduct $6,000 because 6,000 will be the interest amount. Again, this is something that I just wanted to briefly mention because many people ask in regards to mortgages and so forth. And one more mas'ala related to this is, so some people have a large chunk of money that they have saved up, but instead of having it in the savings, they put it in the offset account to reduce the interest amount. That also cannot be deducted because that money that's in the offset account is still your money. You have control over that money. If you wish to withdraw that money in the near future, whenever you can, you have total control over it. So that money in the offset account is also zakatable. You would still have to pay zakat on that money because you still own that money. Unless you, from the offset account, you put it towards your loan, then that's a different story. So whatever your assets is, after excluding your loans or whatever, again, go into detail with your local imam, then from that 2.5% needs to be paid in zakat. And zakat is something that is fard individually on each individual. So this is another thing that many people have misunderstood, that okay, the husband or the father, the breadwinner of the home, he's paid the zakat, so everyone is now free of that obligation. No, that's not how it works. Each person individually will be assessed. Anyone that is baligh, number one, they have to be baligh. Anyone that is baligh and sane and the rules of Sharia apply to them, then if they have the assets that reach the threshold and beyond, then each one of them has to pay their own zakat. If the father wishes to pay on behalf of everyone, then that's fine. But otherwise, the husband will pay his own, the mother or the wife, if she's earning, she's got her own money, she's got her own gold and whatnot, she will pay her own. And if the son, again, or daughter, they're baligh, they're mature, they have their own money, their own assets which crosses the threshold, then they will pay their own. So it's not a one man pays everyone's let off from that obligation. That's not how it works. Everyone individually will be assessed and they will pay their own zakat. Just as when it comes to salah, everyone has to pay their own salah. Just because the father has done it doesn't mean everyone is now set free. Same thing with Ramadan. Just because one person is fasting doesn't mean the rest of them don't have to fast. They all have to do it individually. So that's just a few things in regards to zakat. Another misconception is people sometimes look at zakat as another type of tax. No, it's not a tax. Because if you look at the hadith, another hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where when he was sending Mu'adh radiallahu anhu to Yemen, so he was giving Mu'adh radiallahu anhu some advice that when you go to Yemen and you will introduce these people to Islam, they will accept Islam, then you will educate them, then make sure that you let them know that this money that you take of zakat from them, this money doesn't go to the leaders, the rulers, the kings to enjoy, the treasury for them to enjoy and so forth. No, zakat doesn't go to all of these other people. What happens with zakat is, the Prophet ﷺ clearly mentioned in his own words that تُؤْخَذُ مِنْ أَغْنِيَائِهِمْ وَتُرَدُّ عَلَى فُقَرَائِهِمْ, that you will take from the wealthy and you will distribute into the poor. So it's to balance the community, that nobody within the community has to go to bed on an empty stomach. Nobody in the community has to be worried about what they're going to eat at the end of the day, or will they have enough food for the next day. Nobody in the community needs to worry about not having a roof over their head. Nobody in the community needs to worry about clothing and so forth. So that's why it's to balance the community, and it's to assist the less fortunate in the community. It's not for anybody else. It's not for the rulers. It's not for the kings. It's not for the governors. We're talking about the Muslim government that was existing at the time, and even today, it's not for them. They cannot use it. They cannot own it. They cannot utilize. They cannot benefit from it. It's to take from the wealthy, from the aghniya, and to distribute into the poor. So again, this is also to clear our misconception. It's not a tax. Tax was and is still used by the governments to pay you certain wages and whatnot, and also obviously to help the community, but it's used for various other government related things also, and to pay for many things of those people. But when it comes to zakat, no, it's only for the fuqara. Only the fuqara can benefit from it, and nobody else. So we should not get confused and should not think that zakat is like another tax. No, it's to help the less fortunate in our community. And again, like I've mentioned many times before, it's an investment for our akhirah. These people that are receiving our zakat, they are receiving it for our betterment, for our investment of our akhirah. A day will come when there will be nobody out there to receive our zakat. Where will we invest in our akhirah then? That's another hadith. Inshallah, I will leave that for tomorrow, and inshallah we can discuss more on that hadith in the next video, inshallah tomorrow. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.